Hi, thanks to everyone for coming to this fundraiser as well as our fantastic lineup. My name is Dewey and I am one of the members of the Climate Justice Committee. First up is Kim introducing the Climate Justice Committee. Then we will be hearing from Betsy, who was arrested multiple times fighting against Line 3. Following Betsy, we will hear from Rob, who will be giving some history about Line 3 and talking about why the Line 3 struggle is important. Lastly, we will hear from Meredith, who will show us why civil disobedience is both valid and necessary in this fight. She will also talk about the role of legal defense organizing and fundraising. First up is Kim. She is an activist with both Women Against Military Madness and the Climate Justice Committee. Go for it, Kim.
Thank you, Dewey, for your introduction. As it was said, my name is Kim DeFranco, and I'm a member of the CJC. I want to thank everyone for coming today. It means a lot to us and all who see and understand the importance of fighting for climate justice. The Climate Justice Committee was formed last year by several members of the Twin Cities anti-war movement that wanted to bring in anti-militaristic and systemic perspective to the local climate movement. Rather than focusing our work on changing consumer habits, we are focusing on being a part of a movement, organizing around larger systemic issues that are outside our personal control. One of the most important aspects of this is the U.S. military. The U.S. military is the world's single largest polluter and is consistently exempt from any limitations on pollution, including the Paris Climate Agreement. We also organize with the understanding that climate justice isn't strictly a pollution issue. As our climate disaster continues to unfold, we see the most affected people are those that are most marginalized and oppressed. We play a supporting role in the local struggles against racism and police brutality, and we are a core organizer in the upcoming March 8th demonstration for the Chauvin trial. Some of our past actions include bannering, flyering to bring awareness, and helping organize the January 20th action for Biden's inauguration. Our current campaign is for Biden to roll back 11 of Trump's most disastrous executive orders around the environment and to stop fossil fuel pipeline expansion, including Line 3. So we encourage everyone to sign our petition and to share it online. And I will paste that link to our petition in the chat. And also at the end of the petition, we have another link that if you would like to co-sponsor our petition, please do click on that link and sign you and your group up. That is it. So back to Dewey.
Thank you, Kim. So next up is Betsy. Betsy is a junior at Macalester College and has been on the front lines of the battle against Line 3.
Hi, thanks for introducing me. I'm Betsy, and I'm here to talk about my first and second arrests in the fight to stop Line 3. So a little background about me. I grew up in Nebraska, so the first pipeline I became familiar with was the Keystone XL pipeline, which had its permits revoked in January. A clear environmental concern was that the Keystone was mapped through the Ogallala Aquifer. If an oil spill were to occur, this aquifer, one of the largest reserves of fresh water in the world, would be contaminated. Learning that was the start of my anti-pipeline journey. In high school, my theater teacher took a group of students to see a play called Eminent Domain, which specifically addressed the struggle between landowners and the TC Energy Corporation who commissioned the pipeline. I think this helped me see issues surrounding pipelines that were more than just climate-based, and I began to understand the ways in which pipelines could affect individual lives. And on one of my first days of college, I talked to someone about how I opposed Keystone XL, but I never knew what to do about it. I wasn't a farm owner, so I didn't have any of my own land to defend. And they were the first person to talk to me about Line 3 and to tell me about water protectors who are fighting for the land, for Indigenous rights, and for all our futures. Line 3, like Keystone XL, is a huge environmental threat. Enbridge, the company responsible, frames it as a replacement project for a pipeline built in 1968, but it would actually expand the pipeline and give it a different route. This new proposed route takes Line 3 through treaty territory, untouched wetlands, and many bodies of water, putting them all at risk to oil spills, which Enbridge has a long history of. But even if this pipeline doesn't leak, the construction process would increase deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions. A study by climate organizations, including MN350 and Sierra Club, predicts the greenhouse gas emissions would be comparable to creating 50 new coal-fired power plants. As I learned the harm Line 3 would cause, I became interested in the fight to stop it. Over the next 2 years, I went to trainings and small actions, but I didn't make the time for it that I should have. COVID changed a lot for me. With everything shut down, I was able to reflect on what mattered in my life. In November, after being invited up north, I volunteered along with another water protector to lock down to Enbridge equipment. We were surrounded by people for the first hour, but once the police arrived, they forced everyone else to leave, saying the place for protest was in a city on the sidewalk. So for the next few hours, it was just the two of us in the machine and a handful of cops. They took pictures, tried to convince us to give up, and when the time came, put goggles, headphones, and hoods on us, which is apparently standard safety practice. After being extracted, we were handcuffed and separated. I rode to the jail alone, where I was strip searched and put in isolation for the night. Indigenous peoples have long suffered at the hands of settler colonialism, and Line 3 perpetuates this oppression. Indigenous folks leading this movement are asking for others to listen and be brave. By taking direct action, I hope to stand with them, and I am holding to my own beliefs as well. People turn to direct action when institutional modes fail, wrote author and international peace trainer Daniel Hunter, and that's what's happening with Line 3. We did stop construction for a few hours, but with live streams, filmed interviews, and written statements released, hopefully the action would reach a broader audience and ignite a spark in people. Maybe those people would see us risk arrest, put our bodies on the line, and they would be inspired, or at the very least, start to notice and care. This was something I reminded myself as I sat alone in my cell. The next day, I got out on conditional bail of $100, which the Line 3 Legal Defense Fund was able to cover. Many others have taken similar risks. The number of people arrested in the past few months has surpassed 100. In addition to intentional arrests, police seem to be targeting protesters. Last month, about 48 hours after wrapping up my first case while providing jail support for some comrades, I was stopped by a cop who accused me of being someone else. In a matter of minutes, I was handcuffed and once again sitting in the back of a squad car. When I asked what happened if we got to the jail and they found out they had the wrong person, I was flatly told it doesn't matter. That night in jail was much more emotional. I didn't want to put my family through more stress, and after just getting done with my first case, I wasn't excited to do it again. Not to sound too ungrateful, I am glad I was given soap and a blanket, unlike two of the other people arrested that day. At my arraignment, I was told that conditional bail would be $2,000. And if I wanted to be released without conditions, it would be $6,000. All four of us arrested the day before were given the same offer. The judge agreed to drop the $2,000, but buckled down on the limiting conditions. In recent arrests, charges have gotten higher, bail offers are more expensive, and release conditions are stricter for most water protectors. Actions tend to get media attention. They're supposed to. But the brutal and isolating journey through the court system typically does not. And while most actions last a few hours, days if they go well, court can last months or longer. Luckily, I can turn to a network for emotional support, but that's not the only aid that defendants need. The court system is also financially demanding. Some of the costs include bail, attorneys, fines. The Line 3 Legal Defense Fund got me out of jail the first time, and for many others, it will help them make their way through court. One way to protect our future is to help these defendants in their battles against the state. I would like to just say I'm only one person in this movement, but I really appreciate you listening to my experience and for showing up in support today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betsy. We really appreciate you coming on today. Next up is Rob. So Rob is a volunteer with MN350 and the CJC. Go for it, Rob.
Thanks, Dewey, and thank you, Betsy, for sharing your story. It's really powerful. And we appreciate the work you've done, all of our water protectors. To start, I will share some slides here. All right. And yeah, so to start this section of the talk, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the land we inhabit. So we occupy the homeland of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people and must respect those who were violently removed from their territory. The indigenous people live with unjust consequences of centuries of genocide and assimilation, yet still lead the climate justice movement today. We honor them as custodians of these lands, past and present, and stand in solidarity with the fight against Line 3 and all other state-sanctioned oppressions. So yeah, Line 3 is one of Enbridge's 6 very old crude oil pipelines. It runs from Alberta, Canada to Superior, Wisconsin, and as Betsy said, it is about 60 years old. It pumps tar sands, which kind of look like this. It's a mixture of sand, clay, and bitumen. Bitumen is the crude oil that it can be separated out of this mixture. It's cooked and mixed with chemicals and then sent off to refineries for further processing. Pipelines are really the only efficient way for companies to move this. And for a long time, it was not even seen as worth the time nor the energy. But rising oil prices have changed that sentiment. And now Canada's economy is deeply tied to its tar sands export, and the US is one of its #1 customers. Line 3 was responsible for the largest inland oil spill in US history. This was actually up north in Grand Rapids in 1991. Here's a couple, this is a video from that time, kind of shows us just how gross it gets. So kind of jump in here.
Friday, March 8th, showing the main spill.
And yeah, so you can see there's some oil, and they have to actually come in with chainsaws and cut out the ice that's contaminated. It's really a mess. And we can go to an aerial view as well, just to see the scope of this spill. So yeah, about 1.7 million gallons spilled in 1991 in March. But this is not the only spill of Line 3. There was also one in 2002 in Cohasset, Minnesota, as well as an explosion in 2007 near Clearbrook, Minnesota, which killed 2 employees of Enbridge. Let's see. So yeah, you can kind of see it's just this nasty black mess that's spilling into other waterways. And so, yeah, Enbridge has been trying to expand this pipeline for some time. And let's kind of take a look at what they are proposing. So, here we have a wonderful resource, maptheblacksnake.com. It's a really good resource if somebody's looking to just sort of introduce Line 3 to a friend. So let's scroll. Right here, we've got Alberta, where they harvest all of these tar sands. My internet is kind of dipping out here. But yeah, it's kind of a wasteland. Nothing will live there for quite some time. And then they transport this toxic slurry to refineries. And we should here see all of the pipelines that run across North America. Line 3 being that big one that runs across northern Minnesota. And with pipelines, it's not really a matter of if they spill, it's a matter of when. Here we have just, the easily accessible data from the last 10 years of oil spills. There's the big one in Kalamazoo of 2010. You can see there it costs $817 million to clean that up. And the Enbridge only paid $23 million of that. So they're not going to be paying for it when it spills. It's going to be us. We are just getting all of the bad by having it run through our beautiful state. And yeah, as Betsy said, this is not really a replacement. It's an expansion. They are changing the route even. The pipe is going to have 2 times the diameter of the other pipe, and it's going to cross entirely new watersheds, which we can see here in Minnesota, covered with beautiful water. And yeah, it's just, threatening the Mississippi twice. It crosses, and it'll just poison all of our waters, our drinking water, our fish, our wild rice cultivation, the birds. And when people drink this water, they will get sick. It's an oil that sinks, actually. So it's especially hard to clean up. And as you can see here, it is also trampling over the treaty rights. These are just a few of the treaties that were written in Minnesota's history, which give the indigenous people of our state the right to hunt and fish and drink the water in these lands. And this is directly challenging those rights. Here is the state capitol, which I'm sure we are familiar with. We were marching around those parts earlier this year. The U.S. Army Corps, they gave the permits during the Trump administration for this to continue. A really big other consequence of this construction is the threat to our missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. This is an ongoing issue that just recently got investigated into thanks to Senator Mary Kunesh. The 2020 report found that man camps, this is the man camp for Line 3, exacerbates this issue. Earlier this month, actually, I think it was just this last week, 7 men were arrested with charges associated to sex trafficking, 2 of which were pipeline workers. Matthew T. Hall of Texas, who was charged with a felony for soliciting a person believed to be a minor, and Michael K. West of Missouri, charged with a misdemeanor for solicitation of prostitution and a gross misdemeanor of carrying a pistol with no permit. And that Michael found out about this website from work, so it is very much part of the culture there. Said his judgment was clouded because he was 1,000 miles away from home. And yeah, that's just it. The Enbridge did promise that most of the jobs involved with this pipeline would be in-state. It turns out that's not true. 67% of the 4,642 workers are from out of state. But our water protectors are there nonetheless, fighting this pipeline, locking down to the equipment and slowing the process down. Enbridge over the last quarter said they were $1.1 billion over budget. So as their loans are up for renewal at the end of March, there's a chance that the banks will not support them any further. And I will bump back to our presentation. Here is a wonderful work of art from Christy Belcourt, who's an Indigenous artist here in Minnesota. This is Water is Life, just showing the interconnectedness of all the things that will be affected when this pipeline will spill. And I did want to just mention again that these pipeline workers that have been charged with crimes are about the same as what our water protectors are being charged with. And that's just not right. So Yeah, and line 3, as you can see here by this graph, it is dirty. It produces more carbon emissions than our entire state. It makes our state's climate goals unachievable, which we're already behind on. The most recent final report by the MPCEA says that our emissions have only declined 8% as a state since 2005. And we said we were shooting for 30% by 2025. So, and the transportation industry is actually the lead offender there. And this line 3, as Betsy said, is the equivalent to adding 50 coal plants to our nation. It's also the equivalent to adding 38 million cars to the streets. So it really is a disaster. So what can we do? We can join the water protectors. But if we can't do that, we can absolutely donate to their efforts through supply drives or the Line 3 Legal Fund, which is what we are promoting today. Also, absolutely call your legislators. Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith have not spoken out against this pipeline yet. And if you would like any other resources, contact us at the Climate Justice Committee or take the pledge against the line at MM350's website. Thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate you giving that in-depth view and history of Line 3. And next up is Meredith. So Meredith is an activist with the Climate Justice Committee and the Anti-War Committee. She has also led multiple civil disobedience trainings for the Anti-War Committee. Go for it, Meredith. You're currently at ESP.
So I'm excited to be here. I will be honest that what drew my attention to wanting to be a part of raising funds for this particular cause at this particular time is I have a former student who was arrested with Betsy, and his story about what his experience was like was really moving to me. And I definitely feel like even though I haven't been arrested at Line 3, I feel a real connection with being able to support our sisters and brothers and siblings who are doing that work on the direct lines. But I also think it's important for our listeners at home to realize that there's a lot of ways to help support the environment, even if you are not able to be actually getting arrested to stop Line 3 at this time. And even if you aren't able to do that at this time, that doesn't mean that you can't do it in the future. Okay. So right now we're having a global crisis. We need to reduce greenhouse emissions significantly so that global temperature rises below 2 degrees Celsius by 2100. But we have policymakers that don't actually believe in climate change. And I think what's even worse right now is that we have people who believe in climate change who are in power, both at the state level and the national level, but who like to placate us with like snail-like reforms. Okay. The fact of the matter is that in 2019, a group of almost 400 scientists endorsed an international call for civil disobedience, okay? These are the scientists who are calling out for civil disobedience. That hasn't happened in my lifetime before. That's not normally the role that scientists play in our society. Reuters reported Emily Grossman's speech of the declaration on behalf of the scientists and said, "We believe that the continued governmental inaction over the climate and ecological crisis now justifies peaceful and nonviolent protests and direct action, even if this goes beyond the bounds of the current law. We therefore support those who are rising up peacefully against governments around the world that are failing to act proportionately to the scale of the crisis." Okay? So at the point at which the scientists are saying we should get arrested, I think that's pretty much like, hello, this is important. This is not something that we should be like, the time for talking and negotiating is over. This is the time for like raising the level of action. In Minnesota, we know that we're fighting one of the key fights against climate change with the battle against Line 3. The movement won the fight against Keystone, but that victory doesn't mean much if Enbridge actually gets a monopoly for exporting tar sands out of Canada. Like, that victory is important, but if we don't win this too and other future victories, then it means that we didn't win what we won with Keystone. We need to shut down all the pipelines, and Line 3 is our part of that battle in Minnesota. I think it's important to sort of take a moment to sort of look at why movements like the environmental movement, like the Line 3 movement, are using civil disobedience. And the fact of the matter is that they're really using it for 5 key reasons. The first is that it raises the level of protest. It requires significant amount of state resources to arrest and prosecute protesters. Like, so let's be honest, these small little tiny departments in northern Minnesota are not built to be able to have waves of protesters coming from all over the state, all over the region, protesting, then actually challenging these charges and then going to trial. Like, we are literally sort of like putting a strain on this system. And I think that that's important. It demonstrates the urgency and commitment of the protesters. Like, so people are featured in the news who are willing to get arrested because of how urgent the issue is. And this captures the public's attention. And so it means that, like, as Betsy was talking about, like, you've got these stories that people are telling, and that's to the newspapers, that's to their home communities, that's to their friends and family. And it demonstrates and sort of gets people to think about, okay, yeah, I actually know that that's important. What am I going to do about it? Like, it's sort of raising this level of urgency and commitment. And the third reason is that it gains media attention. And unlike, like, we're not like Enbridge. We're not like these major corporations. We don't have money to hire PR campaign coordinators. So we don't have money to to make advertisements. And so the fact is that free media coverage is pretty golden for us. The fact is that when the media comes and covers, like, look at these people are chaining themselves to this equipment. These people are putting themselves in harm's way. These people are protesting in this manner, knowing that they are risking arrest. That gives us an opportunity to be able to, like, speak to people in their homes, speak to people who are not at the protest, speak to people directly to tell them about why this is important to us. And I think that that's important. And the media, really is stingy with covering things from a leftist perspective. And they're willing to spend time and energy covering a protest if we're using methods that they have determined are sexy. And they think civil disobedience is sexy. And so I think it's an important way that we can sort of cut through the invisibility that they like to give our issues. The fourth is that it raises the level of militancy and resistance in the movement. By people getting arrested, they are basically making a commitment to this cause. Like, you're not going to go get arrested, on an issue and then be like afterwards, whatever. The fact is that Betsy, in her story, like, this is a commitment she's made to herself. This is a commitment she's made to her community. And, that's like, people are making a decision. Like, no, this is something I care about. This is something I'm going to continue to care about. And I think that's important because it becomes more than just one action. It becomes like a commitment to a movement and to a cause for a lifetime. And then lastly, it works. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the environmental movement. We have seen real gains. Like, politicians feel pressure from these types of actions, and they make changes in public policy when we use civil disobedience. And I think it's important to recognize that civil disobedience really is its most powerful when it's used in tandem with large mass public protests, because then it's sending a message. Look, all of these people care about this issue, and the smaller group of people care about it even more to sort of push the envelope. But the fact is that, you've got all of these people sort of at this buffet of activism, choosing whatever works for them, but you're sending a loud message, which is, we are a huge significant chunk of public opinion, and we care about this issue. So, like, Biden has done what we wanted him to do on the Keystone Pipeline, but he didn't do that of his own. He didn't do that just because, like, he feels like that was the right thing to do. He did that because we forced him to do that. The movement forced him to do that. Because, as a matter of fact, like, the environment wasn't even being talked about on the presidential campaign trail. Like, our movement forced that to be talked about, saying, you know what, we agree. We want to talk about the pandemic. We want to talk about the economy, and we want to talk about the environment. And you have to put these issues on the agenda for the debates, for things that you're going to talk about. And so we are controlling the narrative in that way. And I feel like civil disobedience was a huge part of how we did that as a movement. Now, while Jane Fonda has gotten national and international attention with her Fire Joe Fridays that she's organized with national celebrities, several of whom are some of my favorite actors, I'll be real. Our local Line 3 movement is filled with ordinary people getting arrested to stop the work on the oil pipeline. People like Emily, who spoke earlier, and my former students are taking their actions in their 20s because they know that if they don't win this, it is their future that is in jeopardy. And when they talk about their action on events like this or with their families or friends, they are normalizing this idea that people should oppose the way our government and big businesses are working hand in hand together to destroy the environment. One of the key features of the Line 3 civil disobedience movement is that it has actually created a way that Minnesotans are doing a very real land acknowledgement. So Rob, in his presentation, he gave a land acknowledgement, and I appreciate that. But I also think it's important to sort of recognize that when people are going to northern Minnesota, and meeting with people from members of the White Earth tribe or the Red Lake tribe, and seeing this community and seeing like the actual what the oil will do to this land. People who are going to Palisade and meeting with people are actually doing an active act of land acknowledgement, of saying, this is your land. People who say they're doing this for us are trespassing on this land. We want to stand with you in saying no and showing that opposition. And so I also think it's important to, as we are Minnesotans on stolen land, to acknowledgement that this act of resistance in this particular way, this act of doing civil disobedience, is an extension of that type of land acknowledgement, which I think is important. And also, I think that lots of people in the Twin Cities and around the region have also ventured to Palisade and ventured to these, communities to meet with people like Winona LaDuke, who's been giving tours, as an act of a land acknowledgement as well. So even if people haven't gotten arrested, there have been lots of actions where people are coming up and acknowledging this is the land that belongs to these indigenous tribes, and we are standing with you to say that, yes, you should get to decide whether or not this pipeline is created here. And it doesn't matter. We don't recognize the authority of, the federal government and actually, saying that Enbridge can do this. We, the Climate Justice Committee, are not leading this movement to stop Line 3. And I think that's important to acknowledge that. We have protested at the governor's mansion. We have called on him. We've sent a delegation of activists to Palisade, Minnesota. And while our focus has been on the Biden administration, we see Line 3 as a part of that larger national fight against pipelines. We wanted to hold this event today to raise money for the legal defense of these activists. And I'm hoping that someone can put the page for the legal defense in the chat for this event. Many of us in the CJC were arrested on I-94 with 646 other people protesting Trump's call to overturn the election and to say Black Lives Matter on November 4th. Between Line 3 and the I-94 protests, the progressive legal community is stretched incredibly thin. We cannot assume that we can protect the Line 3 defendants from these charges with only pro bono legal defense work. That is why we asked our contact from the National Lawyers Guild what we could do to help. And they asked us to direct our fundraising for the Line 3 Legal Defense Fund. And I think that it's important to understand that you might be going, yeah, I don't have the ability to go up north. I don't want to get arrested in a pandemic. That's real. The point of this talk today is not to tell you that you have to drop everything to do that. You get to decide what you can and can't give at this time. But what we want to do is provide a space for people to say, I couldn't go get arrested, but I can help pay for the legal defense, or I can help pay for people's hotel rooms. Because the fact is that these charges are happening in counties that are not in the Twin Cities. People and their lawyers have to drive up and spend the night there and like have trials. And like that requires a lot of money and, you know, for transportation, for housing, for legal work. And there are lots of ways that people can contribute. So even if you haven't been able to be one of the over 100 people, as Betsy talked about, who've actually gotten arrested, you know, trying to prevent the building of Line 3, there are ways that you can help show your support for that work. And I think that's important. People are taking a lot of time off from work to be able to go, not only go get arrested, but then to actually go back for the, you know, like people are contributing in a variety of ways. But I think it would be great if you could think about as an individual or as a household, like what you could give to try to show your solidarity for that work. You know, whether or not that's an hour's worth of your work. And unfortunately, in our society, that means a lot of different things, right? Like some people, that means less than $15 an hour, and other people, that means more than $15 an hour. But for you to sort of think about what you could contribute at this time to help support that legal work, any amount of money would help. And I think it's also important to understand that, as Betsy was talking about, what they're trying to do, and we're seeing this with the protests that have happened in the Twin Cities as well, is that prosecutors want to prevent people from using civil disobedience or even mass movements like large protests. They want us to protest things in the way that they want us to protest things, like not on the highway, not at Derek Chauvin's trial, not at these different things. Like they want us to sort of control our movement. And that's not how you get things done. We want to push that envelope. And so we need to be able to keep growing our movement. And part of that is that we need to defend the right to dissent. We need to defend the resistance. And so what's important is that we want people to actually challenge these these ridiculous charges that people are getting. People are getting giant charges. People are getting giant amounts of bail, et cetera. And we want them to be able to challenge it. We don't want it to go on the record that like these are precedent-setting charges. These are precedent-setting bails. Like we want to challenge these things because the fact of the matter is that the system cannot actually handle it if everybody who is charged with these crimes actually fights back. But in order to do that fighting back, which actually helps all of us in the movement, we need to help pay for people's legal defense. And so I think it's important to understand that when someone is fighting their charges, they're fighting to keep their own records so that they can get arrested again, clean or cleaner. But they're also fighting so that it's actually harder to prosecute somebody with ridiculous blown up charges the next time. And so in that effort, it is to all of our benefit to help keep protecting this right to be able to use civil disobedience as a way to fight for, to push for what we want as a movement. And so I think it's important for you to think about what you can contribute to help protect that for our movement, you know, and I would like to see, you know, on the page for the Legal Defense Fund. And I can say that the National Lawyers Guild has endorsed this as where we should give our money to. And I think that's important because people like to ask, where's the money going, Meredith? And it's going to this, and specifically the lawyers that are going to get paid for it have said this is the fund that they want us to use for. But what I would love to see, and I'm going to turn over to Dewey in a second, is for people to, in whatever way, shape, or form it is, figure out how to be able to contribute to this, whether or not that's $5 because that's what you've got, or whether or not that's $100 because that's what you've got, you know, or whether or not it's $25 this week and you write yourself a note in your Google Planner that you're going to circle back and give $25 next month because, you know, something will, you know, because you're expecting to get some more money from a job or your tax refund or whatever. But I just want to encourage people to figure out what you can contribute, because I can promise you that it will contribute to this movement and this movement staying strong. And that's what we need. So thank you to our water defenders. Thank you to the work that's being done on Line 3. But also let's remember it's about Line 3, but it's not about Line 3, because the fact is that this is not our last battle. We have more work to do in order to stop climate change. And so we need to keep our movement strong and growing and bigger. Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. So in the course of this webinar today, over $500 have been donated to the legal fund. So if you haven't done it already, please jump on, please donate $5, $10, $15, whatever you have to be able to set over and share it with your friends, family, and everything, and let them know how important it is. As well, the Climate Justice Committee has a new members meeting coming up next Tuesday. So if you're interested in getting involved with this kind of work, please go on to that event and sign up. We'd love to have you on our calls. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our awesome panel. Thank you to Rob, Betsy, Kim, Meredith, and thank you to everyone that's viewing today.